Oh, hello.
Oh,
Welcome to
hey
the
guys.
Oh, hi, gentlemen.
Oh, good to see all of you here. Welcome to the Hymnversation. We are going to be analyzing a hymn or two tonight, and we have with us DJ Bulls, who is um, our guest for tonight. And tonight we're going to be looking at "Teach Me Thy Way," and that's number 688 in Psalms, Hymns, and Spiritual Songs. And so what we're going to do tonight is look at the background of it. We're going to look at the writing in it and sort of examine it from a hymn writing standpoint. We're going to be looking at the meaning of it, and then we're going to be looking a little bit at the musical end, and DJ is going to help us with that. And so, DJ, you got some information on the background of the hymn, so I'll turn it over to you for a second, and you can kind of walk us through that.
And it's good to be with you guys. I'm always happy to talk hymns with anybody. As a matter of fact, I think I told you guys that I'm not normally up really, really late. But tomorrow I'm presenting at the Hymn Society's National Conference. And so this has helped keep me up and be uber more productive than normal at this hour. So I thank you for that. Shameless plug, right? Yeah. So when it comes to hymnody and thinking about our hymns, sometimes it's easy to kind of lose sight of where a song falls in the bigger picture of hymns. And this particular hymn, "Teach Me Thy Way, O Lord," is, to use the common phrase, sort of a diamond in the rough. It's one of those hymns that really doesn't have a very broad or wide appropriation in any number of religious traditions, let alone in churches of Christ, because this song was not found in one of our books until the mid-'80s. And really the first broadly used book that this was in R.J. Stevens and Dane Shepherd's Hymns for Worship back in '87. But even broader, this hymn was written in 1919 by Mansell Ramsey, and did not find too broad of a use. It's only been in one Baptist book in the mid '70s. It was in a few of the mid '80s. Kind of, we don't want to limit ourselves in our audience of hymnal use. So it was in the book the Worshiping Church, which was edited by Donald Hustad, a well-respected hymnologist. It was in the Hymnal for Worship and Celebration. It was in the Trinity Hymnal. It even found its way into a Psalter or two because, as we may talk about, it's very much psalmic language in its makeup. And as Tim mentioned to me, he likes this hymn because its tune name is Camacha. And I
Best
don't know,
true name ever.
there's probably a hymnversation to be had about hymn tune names, because that's even a relatively new practice in our books. Again, not really broadly until the late '70s, early '80s did we even acknowledge that there was a hymnody, in the world. And so, these tune names, they're important. But it's a great hymn. It's rich. It's rich harmonically. It's rich in meaning. It's rich in language. And it may be new to a lot of people, but it's one of those diamonds that's made its way into our books in more recent years. Thank goodness. It's a very prayerful hymn, and so it's a good one for us to dig into.
I just have to ask real quick before you get started, Joel. DJ, back behind you, is that one of those little things that goes like to the right of the pulpit that tells you how much the church gave last week?
No, it's a hymn board.
It's the hymn board. Okay, that's the cool one.
The actual hymn board,
There you go.
With numbers laden from my childhood, the use of one of the worst hymnals ever, Church Gospel Songs and Hymns.
Oh, you went to one of those churches.
Yes, I was hymnologically burdened as a child.
Sounds good. Well, what you were saying there about how it was just basically ignored for so long and has only recently found its way into several prominent hymnals is kind of an interesting thought to those of us who are writers, because people worry so much about whether their hymn's going to get any kind of traction in the brotherhood or anything like that. And it may not, and apparently it may not within our lifetime, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's dead. All it takes is somebody finding that, maybe putting some music to it if it doesn't have it, and all of a sudden those words just go places. So.
At the risk of being too preachery, it's like Jesus said: we plant the seeds. We may not see them come to fruition in our lifetime, but yeah, it's just like that.
Well, it's a service that we do, and so you never know when it's going to bear fruit. All right, so Tim, take us through the general meaning of the song, through the lyrics themselves, and we'll look at that.
Yeah. Teach me thy way, O Lord, teach me thy way. And there's a version out here, I think it's on Paperless Hymnal. Yeah. That was in the Great Songs 86. Is that right, DJ?
Yes, and that would be this one.
It's,
teach me your way.
It hadn't painted yet.
You're not seeing it?
No, it's still in the praise. Oh, there we go. Yeah. It took a couple seconds to paint. So teach me your way. So, and it's interesting, the way this hymn was written, they were able to alter that and really hardly change any of the actual words. So that was really, that doesn't always work. My luck when I try to update a text, they'll rhyme thine with mine, and then you have to totally change the thought. So teach me thy way, O Lord, teach me thy way. Thy guiding grace afford, teach me thy way. Help me to walk aright, more by faith, less by sight. Lead me with heavenly light, teach me thy way. So definitely a lot of the same phrase repeated over and over and over again. And Joe will talk about why the author did that. I think it's a good technique that they used. Is just driving home the point, and so it's fitting that's the title. That's probably the title. It's the title certainly everywhere I've seen this published, and good quality phrases that are repeated a lot in the hymn they make for good titles. And so it's not only the opening phrase, but then it's repeated again just in that first phrase.
Are you still able to see it? Okay, Tim.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's, like any good hymn, there's scripture references all throughout. And this one, I love especially this line, help me to walk aright, more by faith, less by sight. That's a reference, I think, to 2 Corinthians 5. And, the interesting thing, the way that they use the word help me to walk aright, that's not a word I necessarily use every day, but then, this was written 100 years ago, so maybe that was more common in vocabulary then. But in the context of the scripture, it's not just talking about, good posture. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 6 says, so we are always confident knowing that while we are at home in the body, we're absent from the Lord. For we walk by faith, not by sight. We are confident, yes, well pleased rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. So this is a plea for God to teach the persona, whoever's singing this, his way, to be guided with grace and to walk confidently by faith, not by sight, it's not natural. It requires somebody to think spiritually to be confident while walking by faith and not by sight. We just are not going to do that subconsciously.
You said something interesting there, Tim, as well. It is intensely personal, but it's one of those hymns that can be sung by a group, by a congregation, and have corporate meaning. When God's people gather together, they together ask, God, help us to walk by faith.
Yep.
And less by sight, just as much as they pray that prayer personally. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When I'm sad at heart, teach me thy way. When earthly joys depart, teach me thy way. In hours of loneliness, in times of dire distress, In failure or success, teach me thy way. You know, I have a tendency to default to prayer when things are going wrong. Maybe that's maybe that's something that a lot of people struggle with. But I think it's easier to remember God when we remember our need, when we remember how broken we are and helpless we are to fix certain things. And but I love the line, especially in failure or success, teach me thy way. A reminder, remember God even when things are going really well, because all these good things come from God.
One of the things that I was going to mention with regard to the structure, but I'll just throw it in here because I think it fits with what you're saying. I noticed that as well. And, I think that maybe one of the reasons that success is there is because of the rhyme scheme. He already has loneliness and distress, and he's looking for one more word, and success, comes up. And sometimes when you are in a rhyme scheme like this, it's actually really difficult to find triple rhyme sometimes. And sometimes you get backed into a corner and there's just not a word that fits. And then sometimes, every now and then, you weren't necessarily anticipating on writing a particular idea, but that rhyming word just works. And I think that this may be what happened here. He's got loneliness, dire distress, and success rhymes. And at first you're sitting there going, well, that doesn't fit. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, it actually does. Because, you can be incredibly successful and still be sad at heart, and your joy can be gone. And we see that all the time in celebrities and, famous people and stuff like that. And a lot of times we see that in ourselves as well. And
sort of the full circle picture there, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, that's deep. When doubts and fears arise, teach me thy way. When
Just like the slide guy, I was behind you, Tim.
Oh, yeah. When storms o'erspread the skies, teach me thy way. Shine through the cloud and rain, through sorrow, toil, and pain. Make thou my pathway plain, teach me thy way. This one, these two inner verses especially, they're a little bit of a downer, and that may be a reason why some people don't sing it or haven't sung it before. It's not like a sing and be happy or something like that. But I think it's touching on some. It's just real. For a lot of my life, my personal life, I had it pretty good. I've never needed a meal and not had one, that kind of thing. People close to me, didn't die. People close to me didn't get major illnesses or anything like that. And then as life progresses, these things, they happen, and they happen to everybody. And so everybody at some point in their life, and some people have the perpetual rain cloud overhead, and this is their life all the time. I think all of us will go through seasons at time where we have doubts and fears. And so this is a really important plea to God. And this is not the default thing, I think, for a lot of people to go, okay, I'm doubting. God, teach me your way. So it's an interesting choice of words, but it's right, because what does that mean? When I'm asking God, teach me your way when I have doubts and when I have fears, well, what is God's way? Walk by faith and not by sight. So it's kind of elaborating on that, and the preachers on this could go a lot deeper, I think, than that. But the point is, God's way is to be thinking with a spiritual worldview, to be looking through a spiritual lens, and not to be so nearsighted. Every storm passes. Someone just said that. It's on Facebook. It still stuck with me. When storms o'erspread the skies, teach me thy way. Jesus calmed the storm with just his voice, right? So a plea to shine through the cloud and rain, through sorrow, toil, and pain. My niece, who is 12, I think, she painted something for my mom. My mom's got leukemia, and has been she's just got home from some treatment. She spent 6 weeks in the hospital, And my niece painted something for her. My niece doesn't do a whole lot of, she hasn't drawn or painted a lot of deep stuff, but she painted something for my mom that was really interesting. And she painted this storm, and so she got all these dark clouds and they're raining. They're pouring down rain, and then above that is the sun shining really brightly. And her point was in that, and the meaning was that above every storm, the sun is shining brightly and eventually shines through. And that makes me think of that when I see this phrase. And it's a simple thought. And this is going deeper with that spiritually. It's saying it's a plea to God to shine through that cloud and rain, for him to be that sun, to cut through all the toil and the sorrow, the pain, and make the pathway plain or clear.
When you think about the other hymns that speak of storm, I think of Master, the tempest is raging.
Mm-hmm.
I think of Will Your Anchor Hold in the Storms of Life. I think of Love Lifted Me. You may think of others. But of all of those, I think this is the hymn, the tune, which paints the picture, pun intended,
Mm-hmm.
like your niece, harmonically and textually, this hymn really paints the picture of that storm.
Yeah.
The matching of tune and text is superior, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and Tim, you were talking earlier about how maybe there are churches or individuals who don't use this because a couple of the verses are a little bit darker and that kind of thing. And in college, I had a professor who was teaching Old Testament poetry, and we went through a lot of the Psalms and through the imprecations, through the laments, and all that stuff. And one of the comments he made was, those of you who are in college, there are a lot of you who probably haven't suffered a whole lot yet. There are some of you who've suffered a lifetime already, but there are some of you who just haven't seen the need for these words yet. He said, just remember that these words are there. He said, you will come back to them eventually. And I've never forgotten that, and I have come back to them over and over again. My life's been very similar to yours, Tim, relatively easy compared to so many people's, and yet when things do start happening, you do go back to those Psalms and you start to understand why they used the words that they did, and why, Mansell Ramsey here wrote what he wrote.
Yeah.
I think we're experiencing a period of time of renewed interest in those psalms that aren't in a major key.
Yep.
Life is not always G major, D major, C major, and back to G major. There are going to be some minor keys. It's the almost every time I've taught the Psalms in the last 5 years, I have unashamedly ripped off Stevie Wonder's best-selling album title, Songs in the Key of Life. Because that's what these Psalms are.
Yeah.
And for far too long, we swept these laments and imprecations and under the rug because we thought, life's supposed to be blue skies and rainbows. And it's also supposed to be tornadoes and hurricanes.
Yep.
And sorry, just important stuff.
No, it's part of the human experience. It's all part of it, and it's so important for I think for churches to be real with the worship, and that means that as worship leaders are curating songs that will nourish the church, it's so important to speak to the congregation through whatever season they're in, and congregational autonomy is so good because each church knows what that season is like, and no one church can dictate that for another, and there are some times where congregations need to experience these types of emotions together. We don't do a lot of lamenting together, and I think it would be a healthy thing to do. Probably scary or weird at first, if you're not used to that, and frankly, we didn't grow up doing a lot of that. And
when the only minor song you know is "Flee as a bird to your mountain,"
yeah,
you need some more songs in there,
For the battle belongs to the Lord.
Yeah,
which,
there you go.
Great, great in their own right. And certainly, and to your point earlier, DJ, that this works congregationally or individually. This is a great song that, it's so memorable that it would be one that I would go back to. I would draw comfort from it for sure and meaning. Let's look at the last verse. Long as my life shall last, teach me thy way. Where'er my lot be cast, teach me thy way. Until the race is run, until the journey's done, until the crown is won, teach me thy way. Best lines at the end of the hymn. Very strong ending and more scripture bites, right? That sounds very, very Paul. I fought the good fight. I finished the race, kept the faith. Or echoes of Philippians. A lot of running and race analogies there. Whether you think of life as a race or as a journey, and in Paul's case, reaching forward for the prize, and that crown, and teach me thy way. So really, really. It's a strong ending to this and a positive ending. So, when you're singing this hymn, it just works that, while those inner verses, they're going to have a tendency to want to be sung softly and more contemplative, or just with an emotion that fits the text. This final verse definitely calls for maybe a pickup of the pace, and maybe with more volume. I think just people are naturally going to put more energy into these really powerful thoughts of the race being run and the journey being done, and that the crown is won. I love that.
Renewed strength.
Yeah. Powerful thoughts, guys. Any other thoughts before we dig into the structure?
I think we've covered it pretty well.
Yeah, we'll probably dwelled on it too long. Joel, take us through from a writer's perspective, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
All right. So one of the things that I have been thinking about a lot lately, and I think I mentioned this maybe in the other Hymnversation that was posted, is that when we think about hymn writing, a lot of what we are doing ends up at the end of the day being rhyming or parallel structure or things that are symmetrical to each other. And that's true of poetry across the board. It's true of art in general quite a bit. But one of the questions that people ask a lot is, if I'm going to write a hymn, do I have to rhyme it? And the answer to that is no, because there are a lot of hymns that don't rhyme the words at the end of the lines. But I don't know of very many successful hymns at all that don't have some form of parallel structure or symmetry to them to make them beautiful and to provide them structure. I mean, even when you look at music or the meter that the song's written in, it's going to be, a line of so many beats followed by a line of so many other beats, or a line of, so many syllables followed by a line of so many syllables. And you're going to have parallel ideas and that kind of thing. And this hymn is just full of that from beginning to end. And so we're going to look at the rhyme scheme, the end rhymes of the phrases, but we're also going to look at the rhyming words, the rhyming lines, and how the structure of how this thing is written kind of parallels itself as well. And so this thing is written, we're going to call it in an AX, AX, BBBX structure. And you can write that down and kind of go back to the hymn and see how that works. But the A lines are going to be, we'll look at verse 2 actually to sort of see that, because verse 1 kind of repeats the same phrase a couple of times. But verse 2 says, when I am sad at heart, that's the A phrase, teach me thy way, the X phrase. When earthly joys depart, A phrase, teach me thy way. So you see heart and depart rhyme. And then you've got the X line, which is just teach me thy way. And it's, throughout the hymn. And then you have the BBBs. Help me to, or in verse 2, in hours of loneliness, in times of dire distress, in failure or success. And then you have the X line, teach me thy way. And so you've got basically two sets of rhymes here. You've got the A rhymes, and then you've got the B rhymes, followed by intermittently the X lines, teach me thy way, repeated. Now, the first thing we want to talk about is just that X line, teach me thy way. Tim already alluded to this, and that is a repeated phrase within a hymn. And that's a really powerful tool to use because it grounds the hymn in one central thought. You're not going to be able to walk away from this hymn not able to understand what he wanted to say when he wrote it. He wants to know the will of the Lord, and there's no question at all about that. And when you have a phrase like that, it needs to be a very simple idea, and yet at the same time, it needs to be a very emotionally deep idea. It can't be something that is trite. Otherwise, it just kind of gets lost. And there are a few hymns that have repeated phrases like that, where the content around the triter phrase kind of carries the hymn a little bit. But generally speaking, if you're going to repeat something this often in a hymn, it needs to resonate with people.
You mean like he bore it all?
Sorry.
I'm not going to argue with the phrase. I'll just argue with the pairing of the music and the lyrics on that one.
I didn't even know we did polkas in Churches of Christ.
Apparently we do, at least once. So we'll try anything once, right? Even if it kills it. And so you want that phrase to be an emotionally resonant phrase. And teach me thy way is. We have all been at the point where we didn't really even know what to say. And what's interesting is, as deep as some of these lyrics get, they're very general. They don't get so specific that, I can't use them for whatever problem I happen to be facing at the moment. So he's not trying to diagnose your problem and give you the solution to it. At the end of the day, he wants to give you something general enough that when you don't know what else to say, you can use this hymn to say it. And teach me thy way is exactly that kind of a phrase. And then when you look at the A rhymes, we'll look at verse 1 here. Teach me thy way, O Lord. And then at the second part of that rhyme is thy guiding grace afford. And so in the first verse, the way the A rhyme functions is it's just clarifying what he wants. Teach me thy way, thy guiding grace afford. In other words, offer me your guiding grace. And so it's just an alternate way, a parallel way of repeating that idea. But when you get into verses 2 through 4, it actually tells us in what situation he wants God to teach him his way. And so it's when I am sad at heart, when earthly joys depart, when doubts and fears arise, when storms o'erspread the skies, long as my life shall last, where'er my lot be cast. And so it's actually giving us in those lines a direction for him. Without this, the hymn doesn't have any direction. You don't know where you're going. But those phrases ground it and tell us exactly what's going to come a little bit later in the verse. And what's interesting is not only do you have parallel phrases, I mean, you look at every one of those phrases in those 4 verses, the A phrases are the same thought, just repeated in different words. And then at the end of each of those lines, you've got a rhyme. And that rhyme just drives it home. And it actually gives you a logical structure in your head that tells you these ideas go together. And so not only do you have the same thing just said in a slightly different way, but you've got a common rhyme that drives it into your head. And that's actually really important, not just for sort of a logical flow to the hymn, but it's also good for memory. You see that we're going to see this again in the triple rhyme in the B section here, but I remember when my daughter was just born, I was singing her hymns. Tim's kind of in this situation right now with his daughter. And I started singing her this one, and I kind of panicked about halfway through the first verse because it had been a long time since I had sung the hymn. And all of a sudden thought, well, I don't know if I remember this. And I got to help me to walk aright. And when I hit aright, I remembered the rest of the verse. More by faith, less by sight. Lead me with heavenly light. Teach me that. And those rhymes just call it right to mind. And rhyme is an incredibly powerful tool for that. And so what he's doing by rhyming those first couple of phrases and writing parallel ideas, which he does all throughout the hymn, is he's just using every tool at his disposal to drive it into people's brains. And so those A rhyming lines anyway, give us direction for the hymn. And then when you look at the B rhymes, what you have are the specifics of how he wants these things to be done. And so you've got verse 1, teach me thy way, O Lord, teach me thy way, thy guiding grace afford, teach me thy way. Then help me to walk aright, more by faith, less by sight, lead me with heavenly light, teach me thy way. And as Tim already mentioned, you've got the scripture bites in there. And so you've kind of got a triple threat here now. You've got scripture bites, which are always good. Making your hymn sound like the gospel is a great thing. You've got parallel ideas, walking aright, walking by faith, walking in heavenly light. Those things are all parallel. And you've got a rhyme. You've got the same sound at the end of each line. And those three things make it very difficult to forget.
See what you did there. Scripture bite, walk aright, more by faith, left by sight, heavenly light. I see what you did.
There you go. Well, I'm subtle like that.
He didn't know it.
That was tight.
Okay, let's not get into the rhyming thing. We can do that all day long. And let's not even get to the creation salvation rhymes here. All right.
Coronation.
We already talked about this, but I'll remind us about it. In hours of loneliness, in times of dire distress, in failure or success, teach me thy way. I very seriously doubt that he had success as a word that he was thinking about using when he wrote that, but it works. And the idea of being sad at heart when you're successful is a very, very human condition. And it's one that we need to sing about. We need to remember that that's there, because if any of us become successful and become depressed at our job, or become isolated in our success to the point that we feel all alone, this is the verse you need to go to. This is what you need to be singing to the Lord.
And I don't want to jump out of my lane here, but I think it's interesting that on all those inner rhymes is when he uses the dotted quarter note every time to break up the quarter note consistency. I don't want to say monotony, but he uses the dot very effectively. He goes from loneliness being one word to dire distress being two words, or success, all by themselves. You'd think, wow, how are those going to go together? But using the dot, he makes the emphasis level out in such a way where it feels very natural. Some people try to force that. As we all know, we could come up with places. Alexander Campbell, in one of his hymnals, says we should never be prone to using sounded epithets. In other words, forcing extra syllables into words just to make it fit. That doesn't feel anything close to that here. This feels very natural. And so loneliness, dire distress, or failure or success, I mean, it just feels very natural.
Right. Very good. So in verse 3, the B section here is incredibly done, I think, because he's got this idea at the very beginning of the verse, when doubts and fears arise. And when he goes to, when storms o'erspread the skies, my cliche-o-meter starts going off. About to get every time you have doubts and fears, you're going to have a storm. And when you have a storm, the billows are going to start rolling, and they're probably going to roll a couple of times before
But we don't have any fears and tears, which is good, or tears for fears.
Well, that's
even.
true. Yeah, we don't have a cliched rhyme there. But you as a writer, I just kind of brace for, cheese balls for the rest of the verse. And that is
which those are good, by the way. Just not in him.
Not at all what he does. Tim did a good job of explaining this, but
what did you call it? Your cliché-o-meter?
Cliché-o-meter, yeah. I think that's Craig's.
I think that's exactly what it evoked in my mind, was Craig's little sign.
Well, it's actually it's evolved or devolved into a fart app, and we just
there.
Exactly. So Craig's favorite was the brown mosquito.
The schlockometer.
Yeah, when I was at the Hymnar, he had 3 people with 3 different pitch pipes play a Discord. We didn't have the fart app, but we needed to make sure that
I believe at the Hymnar last year, it was a certain Berman who introduced the fart app.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Much to Matt Bassford's chagrin.
Oh, he participated too, in spirit anyway. But yes, we also, a few of us would get out the Pitch Perfect app and do an augmented fourth. So we do that too. It's great.
Everybody go to the Hymnar. It's a wonderful place.
Great experience.
All right. So
really
speaking of sorrow, toil, and pain, continue.
He, you're set for the cliches, and that is not where he goes. Shine through the cloud and rain. And so instead of leaving us out in the boat, Master, the tempest is raging, which is a great hymn in itself, but a lot of the lesser knockoffs of that song are just not very good. Instead of leaving us out on the boat or, crying out or whatever, it's a petition for God to shine through the cloud and rain. That image, if you've ever been driving and you can't wait for the storm to end because it just seems like it's following you on your trip, and all of a sudden, you can see up ahead that it's ended and the sun's just shining down and you're going to be driving right through it. I mean, that's the picture that I get here.
I keep waiting for someone to write a hymn with "It's raining cats and dogs," but it just hasn't happened yet.
I believe someone eventually will, unfortunately. But
some people have written songs about recycling, batteries, so raining cats and dogs. It could happen. So
I mean, it worked for "It's Raining Men," so who knows?
I wouldn't put it past anybody. In fact, it may already have been done.
Yeah, I bet if we looked.
It's true.
Nobody
bust out some of my Vatican II hymnals.
Let our silliness take away from the beauty of this third verse. But that imagery is just so good, and he doesn't go to the typical places that a lot of writers would. He finds a way to make it unique. And I'll just say this: there are certain subjects like this that are very, very hard to avoid cliches within. The crucifixion is actually one.
Yeah.
You hit, maybe you've got one verse where you want to just stick a little crucifixion reference in there. And how in the world do you talk about him, shedding his blood or something like that without getting into cliches? It is so, or even just overdone material where people had a good idea and had a good phrase, but it's been used so much that people are just going to move right past it when they sing your words.
Yeah.
It's hard to write about some of those subjects.
And I think that's one reason why some of the newer hymns that we're seeing written, whether it's by, the Getty Townend group, or even, the modern predecessors out of the New English Renaissance, Brian Wren and others, they have taken it on the chin in their attempts to write new phraseology because they don't want to write something that's been overdone or that has become trite in its meaning. I think about how deep the Father's love for us. I remember hearing and seeing so many talk about the Father turns his face away. Don't overread into what the composers have written in your desire to explain something that the writer never intended. He's trying to paint a holistic picture of the event. he's not trying to, force his atonement theology on someone necessarily. I think sometimes we can try to over-explain some things and get away from the bigger picture of what a hymn is trying to paint and miss something that's very deep and very meaningful. So I think that's a great point, Joel. And I'm sorry if I clouded that with my attempt at explaining it, but I just think that's really important what you said.
Hobby horses are welcome here, so it's all right. We like riding them here.
All right, so let's get verse 4 out of the way, and then we'll turn it over to DJ for the music. In the B section there, until the race is run, until the journey's done, until the crown is won. Once again, you've got the triple threat, but you've actually kind of got a quadruple threat here. You've got parallel phrasing, you've got the rhyme, you've got the scripture bite, and you also have until.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't get any tighter than that. And when any of us ever get to the level of being able to, write a line like that, then, we can at least stand up and pat ourselves on the back or thank the Lord for giving us the lyric, because you just don't get any tighter than that in writing. And by the time you've hit this point in the hymn, like Tim said before, it elevates things, and you want to sing this out because you're actually looking to what verse 3 pointed you to. You're looking to actually getting into the light and getting to the end of the road where everything's, better. And so you're ready for this now, and he's built you up to this point, and he pays it off with about as much parallel structure as you can possibly fit into 3 lines of a hymn.
I don't think I ever even recognized the way he used until you just mentioned it, because you're focusing on race, journey, crown.
Mm-hmm.
And so until just sort of slides unnoticed as a vehicle to get you to each of those high points in the phrase.
Right.
So yeah, really masterful, isn't it?
It's very well done. And so every time I look at this one, I just aspire to come up
go
with
higher.
Cheap knockoff. If you can cheaply knock off this hymn, it's going to be better than most of the hymns that are out there. So he did a very good job with this one.
It kind of makes you almost wonder if maybe this song missed a broader reception because it was intimidating. You know what I mean?
Should be. Yeah.
There are, and I realize that we're going in deeper with one hymn, and the next time you guys look at a hymn, you're going to feel like, wow, this is the best thing since Wonder Bread was invented. But sometimes these hymns that are written so well make everything else look bad. So you know what? We can get more in if we just forget about this. I don't know. That's a crackpot theory. But
C.S. Lewis, it said that the church was full of hymns with 5th-rate lyrics set to 6th-rate music or something like that.
That's exactly who said it.
Yeah. And, that's often true. I wouldn't say that it's always true. This hymn is a shining example of it not being true. And really, I think that Psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs contains a lot of hymns that don't fall into that category at all. But there are tons of them out there that are just not worthy of a church service.
And I think it was,
and it's going to make them look bad.
Martin Sheen on the West Wing, who said, speaking of one of his political opponents, he's an 8-track mind in a CD world. That
quote hasn't aged well, has it?
No, it hasn't. And vinyl's coming back again. It's like, whoa, how do we interpret this?
Well, DJ, talk about the music to this. This one, it's a beautiful hymn. Why does it work?
Okay, I'm gonna move over here to my piano because I just have a few things to point out. Can you still see me okay over here?
Yeah.
So this is as we said in the introduction, this is one of those hymns that has an incredible amount of harmonic variety. In a world where hymns are, four chords and a cloud of dust. In so many cases, not that that's always bad. There are many great 4-chord songs. Don't judge me. Don't write me off. This song is anything but that. It's a very broad harmonic vocabulary. Whenever I'm looking at a hymn that I don't know, I always just try to look at the melody first. So melodically, if you just were to look at the melody and you weren't looking at the harmony, can you hear that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's nothing to there. That's 4 notes, and then we move up a step, and we kind of have a very an A prime version of that same harmonic sequence. And so far melodically, not much to write home about. And we get a little variety in the latter 2 4-bar phrases. Anytime he ends a phrase, he takes the antecedent part of the phrase and uses it to start the next phrase. That's the biggest leap in the entire song right there. You think of where do I begin? Frank Sinatra, sorry. I digress. Lead me with heavenly light, teach me thy way. So, it's if we were to strip every melody of all their underlying harmony and reevaluate the hymn, it would give us a complete different world musically than we're used to. But when you add Mansell Ramsey's harmony, and again, same guy wrote lyrics and music on this hymn. Think about how the kudos we gave him for his lyric writing. And I would say that his harmonic writing is every bit as good as his treatment of the text. And he uses simple things like chord inversion to really provide some variety here. And he always does it the right way. If there's an accidental note like the B natural that he uses on the first page, or the raised fa there, or whether it's the T that he lowers to te on the second page to the E flat on the last measure of the third line, and anything that he does, he approaches it the right way. When you write a hymn with dissonance, it's best to approach it with stepwise motion, so it's not jumping all over the place like someone goosed a pig trying to sing a song, and it's all over the place. He does it stepwise, and it makes it very natural. So a very natural, naturally moving harmonic line in all parts. The bass is good. The bass is the most challenging, and because it has more leaps. But even at that, the entire first line, the basses sing within 2 chords, the 1 and the 5. That's it. Everything is within those 2 chords. The alto and the tenor have very little movement. That's what you want. Just between us chickens, you never want to leave the altos and tenors to do too much dancing together, because it's going to lead to trouble. And yes, that's a joke. But they're not moving around much, so it's very easy to sing. And there we have our first little moment of harmonic entrance, something that's called a retardation. So you have
That's offensive.
Sorry.
I'm just kidding.
We have our first accidental introduced. And he stays there. He stays there for 2 full measures. Again, using stepwise motion. in the inner parts to do any moving between chords. And we have some leaps going on to the next phrase. Again, there's some more accidental movement, but it's approached by step and it's departed by step, which is the right way you want to do it. Oh, that's different. In musical lingo, in the key of F, it's strange to find a D major chord. How in the world does that fit in the key of F major? Well, he uses it. It's called a secondary dominant. It's a 5 of 2, and the only chord that can go to is a 2 chord. Well, guess where he's going? A 2, and he resolves it the right way. I mean, it's just elegant as all get out. And that's a very technical musical term, all get out. You can find that in the Grove Dictionary, in the book of Second Opinions. It's very, very, very important. So, I mean, you think about the things that make a song really easy. Limited harmonic range, okay? He goes down to that low D. That's the biggest leap and the lowest point in the song. Other than that, he's staying within the interval of a sixth. Look at the keyboard, DJ. Yeah, an interval of a sixth. He's kept everything within a very tight range. No person singing any one of these parts is going to feel stretched or at their limits. He really gives beautiful harmony to a very simple melody. He harmonizes it the right way. He follows all the part writing rules and does so with a very unique and uncharacteristic harmonic vocab. I was trying to think if there's any other hymn that I can think of that has a similar harmonic vocabulary. And the only one that I could think of that's anything close to this is Breathe on Me, Breath of God, which has a very unique harmonic structure using secondary harmonics. And it's just, I mean, this is one I would use in my music theory class as an example.
Well, so I got a question for you. I know that I'm a very amateur bass, and so that means that musically I'm down about as low as you can get and not know how to read music at all. But I know that a lot of times what helps me sing a bass part is kind of feeling where the chord is going, because I may not even know what the chord is, but I know what the sound is I'm looking for. And this is filled with so many sounds that you just don't typically hear. Does that complicate things for singers like me?
It doesn't, because even though he's using a wide harmonic vocabulary, you could almost do this with 4 chords. Teach me thy way, O Lord. Teach me thy way. 2 chords, first line. Keep it going. Thy guiding grace afford, teach me thy way. So even if even if you're primarily a singer who first hears by ear and then finds a part, you're going to be singing things within the chord. What he has done is essentially provided a colorful contour for how he stays within these chords. The bass doesn't have to go up on the second note. Matter of fact, he breaks the part writing rule on the second chord because he doubles the third. Mm-hmm. You're never supposed to double the mi, in any chord. Mm-hmm. In this case, he doubles the third, and that's a harmonic no-no. But it's for color and to provide contour for the line. But it's exactly that. It's just color. You're still going to hear, I think, where you need to go.
Yeah.
And that was edited out. That was altered in Fast. They removed that.
The double third?
Yeah.
Oh, I wonder who the lucky chap was who caught that. May they get a gold star on their Sunday school harmonic Bible class chart.
Probably Charles Willis. I think he did a lot of the part writing editing, or Charlie would.
Yeah, but it's done well. And the reason he does it on the second chord is because if you look at the very first chord on the second line on Thy Guiding Grace, he wants the bass to begin on the third there. So he builds that harmonic into your ear on the first line so that starting the second line, you have at least heard something once before to know, oh yeah, I've done that before. So I can feel confident starting a phrase on something other than do.
Wow.
And I think it's interesting too, doubling the fifth there at the beginning of that second system. That sometimes that can sound really annoying or just overpowering, but it works there. It's just interesting there.
Lots of folks choose to double that fifth unnecessarily in lots of places. I mean, I have done my fair share in hundreds of arrangements. Knowing that you can't double the third often lends itself to a tripling of a root or doubling of a fifth. Mm-hmm. Well, instead, you think, okay, is this congregationally singable? Okay, well, if that's the case, then I should try to keep things in a root position with all voices of the chord present, with as little movement as possible. Mr. Ramsey did that everywhere else. And he did it really well.
Yeah, there's and I know we're running out of time, but I did want to talk about one part of the melody that does tend to trip up the congregation. I think it's beautiful. I think when people hear the harmony, I think they're less likely to mess it up. But on that B section there, you've got walk aright.
Yeah.
Is
the
a
octave
fifth.
leap.
Right, less by sight, a fifth, and then heavenly light is a sixth.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of congregations, they continue that pattern of a fifth, and so they'll sing, lead me with heavenly light.
Yep.
Instead of heavenly light, because they're not hearing, they would not go to the T there if they could hear the rest of that two chord, because it's just,
that's right.
They're turning into a seven, I guess. It's not beautiful.
Yeah, they're trying to end it a measure early. They're thinking fa, ti, ti, and T can only go to do.
Right.
So if you do that, you're going to have not so fast, my friend, but it's just one of those things that takes repetition. Bum, 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 bum. It's one of those things where you just have to take a little time and this is a soapbox for me, but regardless of how well your church sings or how well it doesn't sing, you need to take time over the course of your year to get your church together and sing and practice and learn. And this is a soapbox too. Don't do it on, let's do it on that Wednesday night after Christmas when we know we're going to have, 7% of our congregation here. No, find a time when you're going to have good attendance, get everybody together, put them in parts, have everyone sing the melody. By having everyone sing that melody, I think you will have significantly improved their chances of hitting that harmony better. And again, that's just a personal soapbox thing that I've tried to incorporate everywhere I've been over the last decade, and it does make a big difference. But you think with singability in mind, and I think that's one of the things that makes these hymns that have been around forever, be around forever, because they're so stinking singable.
Yeah. Very good. Well, that's been a great hymnversation, I think. Appreciate you being here, DJ, and we really enjoyed talking to you. You've added a lot with the musical side of this. I think that's an element that we haven't had up till now in our conversations. Not that Tim can't talk to it to a great degree, but we just haven't gone there, and I really enjoyed that tonight.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's fun to do it with you guys.
All right. Well, always enjoy getting together and talking about hymns together.
All
Anything
right.
else before we get done?
No, I think this was awesome. DJ, thanks for staying up late. I know you're turning into a pumpkin. Good luck with your presentation.
I'm sorry. What?
Exactly. Yeah, good luck with the presentation. I'm so jealous. I would love to be a part of the conference this week, and I'm actually off. I could totally be a part of it, but I'm too cheap to invest in it at this time. I spent the money on a baby instead.
Yeah, you have a baby instead, so there you go.
It's a good trade-off.
There you go. And I hope that the pictures are beautiful. Hope Sarah's doing well, and all that fun stuff. So thanks, guys. Enjoyed it.
All right.
Yeah, y'all be good. Have a great night.
Hasta luego.
See ya. Bye.